Hello, everyone, and welcome to NJBIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give everyone a few seconds to migrate in from the waiting room. As you make your way in, please mute yourself and switch your view from gallery to speaker. If you're not sure how to do that, the team will post some directions in the chat. A quick reminder that this program is being recorded and you're all muted for the duration. To kick things off, I will pass it on to one of our council leaders, Jason Holt, member of Chiesa. Oh, I should have gone with CSG, shouldn't I, Jason? That was
Yes.
silly of me.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I can't even. Oh, Jason, take it away.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Holt, and I am one of your council leaders. And I am with the law firm of Chiesa Shahinian and Giantomasi. Very difficult to say, so we just say CSG. We're glad you could make it to this month's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council meeting. We're really happy that you're in attendance. So just a quick reminder that we are recording this program and it will be sent out to you within the next week. Big welcome to everyone, and especially a major shout out to my co-chairs here at NJBIA. Bian de Guzman, who is the Director of Development of I Learn Schools, Inc., Shai Hopkins, Marketing Coordinator of New Jersey Small Business Development Center, Jackie Lurea, President of Alexina Consulting, Craig Morton, Assistant Vice President of Affairs of Fairleigh Dickinson University, and Andrea Murphy, Director of Environmental Affairs and Sustainability of Panasonic North America. So those are your council leaders, and I'm also included in that. I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to thank all of our sponsors, our sustaining partner, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, our business roundtable partner, Horizon, and our event partners, Association Member Trust, Capital Health, CSG Law, Focus New Jersey, Integris, and New Jersey Business Magazine. We're going to incorporate some networking into this event, so make sure you take advantage of that a little bit later. And now I'm going to toss it back to NJBIA.
Thank you. We at the New Jersey Business and Industry Association are thrilled that this group continues to grow and thrive under the leadership of such amazing people. For those of you who are new to NJBIA, we are the largest statewide business association in the country, representing approximately 1 million jobs in the state of New Jersey, which amounts to about 1/4 of New Jersey's workforce. We offer customer development opportunities, visibility through events, magazine ads, or our podcast and TV shows, and money-saving discounts on stuff you're probably already paying for, like payroll, healthcare, a 401k solution, and HR support. If you're interested in more info on us, I'll drop the website into the chat along with my contact info. Feel free to be in touch and we can get you whatever you need. I am Kate Conroy, and that's all for me. So now I will toss it back to the fabulous Jason Holt.
Wow, I didn't know I was fabulous, but I'll take it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Melissa Salimbene. She is my law partner at CSG Law, but she's also a practice group leader. She's the practice group leader of the Employment Law Group. She's an experienced employment litigator and very trusted advisor. For her litigation practice, Melissa regularly represents public and private employers of all sizes and industries before state and federal courts and administrative agencies in all aspects of employment litigation, including defending claims of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and wage and hour issues. Melissa also brings and defends restrictive covenant claims involving trade secrets, confidentiality agreements, non-compete agreements, and other post-employment obligations. Melissa's credentials are beyond reproach. In addition, she regularly counsels business owners and human resource professionals in order to ensure compliance with applicable employment laws and obligations. This includes advising her clients on employee hiring, discipline and termination, classification issues, necessary policies and procedures, wage and hour requirements, ADA accommodations, leaves of absence, and other workforce management issues. In connection with this advice, Melissa prepares employment-related documents, including employee handbooks and policies, employment agreements, restrictive covenants, confidentiality agreements, and separation agreements. She also represents individuals in negotiating employment agreements and separation agreements. So I hope you're taking notes because Melissa does pretty much everything in employment law. She also conducts internal workplace investigations on employment-related issues, such as claims of harassment and discrimination, and she provides trainings to employees, including sensitivity and anti-harassment training. Melissa also advises clients on employment issues that arise in the context of corporate transactions, including mergers and acquisitions, downsizing, and reorganization. This includes the due diligence as well as negotiation and preparation of employment-related agreements. So, while Melissa is a graduate of Rutgers Law School, she also served as a legal research and writing instructor and staff editor of the famed Rutgers Law Record. Prior to joining the firm, Melissa was a law clerk to Judge Sybil Moses, the assignment judge of the Superior Court of Bergen County. After that very abridged evaluation of Melissa's credentials, because if we took them all, I mean, we'd be here all day. So I'm thrilled to actually welcome Melissa. So come on in, Melissa.
I'm here. Thank you, Jason. Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick so you can see our slides. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'm sure someone will tell me if we can't. But thank you for that introduction, Jason, and you're reminding me how busy I am. It sounds like I do a lot. I'm really happy to be here and thrilled to present to all of you today on implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace without creating legal liability. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm going to refer to that today as DEI, and we'll talk more about what the DEI means, but I'll call it DEI today, has become an essential factor in workplace management and something we're seeing more and more organizations addressing. And that's a great thing because a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace is really important. It makes everyone feel valued, thus boosting employee engagement and experience. DEI is also credited for improving corporate innovation and bottom line through a higher performing and more creative workplace. However, before everyone runs to implement DEI initiatives in their workplace, they need to be mindful about that and make sure they're doing it lawfully and without creating potential legal liability. So today, we are going to cover all those things. We are going to talk about what is DEI and how is that different from the concepts I'm sure you've all heard about of equal employment opportunity and affirmative action. A lot of times people use those terms interchangeably, but they're really three separate, unique concepts. We're going to discuss not only the importance of DEI in the workplace, but also the benefits that result from having it. And it's not just benefits to the individual employees, it benefits the employer as well. We're going to discuss the applicable laws that relate to DEI, in particular anti-discrimination statutes and equal pay laws. And then I'm going to give you some tips and best practices for successfully implementing DEI in your workplace without running afoul of these applicable laws. So turning to the three concepts. So how is DEI different from affirmative action and equal opportunity employment? So equal employment opportunity, which I'll refer to as EEO, these are local, state, federal anti-discrimination laws that in general prohibit employers from making employment decisions, hiring, firing, promotions, raises, any terms and conditions of employment based upon a person's protected characteristics. And I'm sure you've heard that term, protected characteristics. Those are things like race, gender, national origin, disability, age, military service. Depending on what law we're looking at, depending on what state we're looking at, sometimes protected categories vary slightly, but generally, those are the protected categories at issue. So in essence, EEO, that's the enforcement of these laws that prevent discrimination. And these anti-discrimination laws essentially apply to every employer and set forth what employers cannot do when making employment decisions. So these are prohibitive laws. These are saying, don't look at someone's protected characteristic when you're deciding, who are we going to hire or who are we going to promote. The concept of EEO, I'm sure you're all familiar with. I'm sure you've all seen on job sites, job postings, websites, where an employer has an equal opportunity employer statement, which, it's usually a sentence or two saying, we provide equal employment opportunities to all applicants and all employees, regardless of any protected status. That's a great thing to do. I recommend everyone does do that, but it's only meaningful if it truly represents what the company is doing. It also should extend beyond hiring. So putting that on a job posting is great, putting it on your website is great, but you should also have that statement in your employee handbook and making all your current employees know that your company is committed to equal employment opportunities. Now, affirmative action is a different concept. And I know a lot of people have probably heard about that in the news lately in regards to what's going on with colleges and the Supreme Court decision, but affirmative action as it applies in the workplace is a different set of laws. And those are laws that remedy discrimination by requiring covered employers, and I'm stressing covered employers, I'll tell you why in a minute, to take steps to ensure equal employment opportunities. So unlike the EEO laws that prohibit consideration of protected categories in making employment decisions, affirmative action laws focus on eradicating discrimination in the workplace by requiring those covered employers to actually take affirmative steps to recruit and advance minorities, women, persons with disabilities, veterans, and others who have been historically excluded in the workplace. Those affirmative steps or affirmative actions include implementing training programs, having outreach efforts, and taking other positive steps. And the law actually requires whatever those affirmative steps and actions are going to be memorialized in writing. And now, unlike EEO laws, the discrimination laws that apply to essentially every employer, affirmative action laws apply to very few. They only apply to certain employers that have federal contracts at certain thresholds. And then finally, there's this concept of DEI initiatives. So unlike equal employment opportunities and affirmative actions, which are based in law and required by law, DEI initiatives are voluntary. So these are programs that employers on their own initiative decide to do in order to increase the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and to help historically underrepresented groups and individuals feel equal and included in the workplace. So to better understand DEI initiatives, we're going to now break down the DEI in that. So going to the next slide. All right, let's talk about, well, what is diversity? So this is the real or perceived differences in attributes related to one's identity that influences their behaviors and relationships. Typically, there's two types, inherent and acquired, sometimes also referred to as primary and secondary. And you can all see the slide, but looking at inherent or primary, those are traits that you're born with or born into, things you have no control over. So things like, your gender at birth, age, race, disability, sexual orientation. And on the flip of that is the acquired diversity or secondary diversity, which is diversity of perspectives and a way of thinking that you've acquired through your life experiences. And so things, such as your education and the impact that's had on you and how you look at things, skills and knowledge you've developed through life, geographic locations where you were raised or where you've spent significant periods of time, prior work experience, military experience, And then at the end, what I think has now become one of the biggest influences on us is television, media, social media, the internet. There's a lot of people out there telling us, how to think and what to think about things. And all of this, how all of these perspectives impact us is part of, what attributes to our diversity. Now, when we talk about workplace diversity, that's the concept that our workplace should reflect and look like the makeup of our greater society. So that's the understanding, acceptance, and value that's placed upon the difference between our coworkers. And these differences may include, but aren't limited to, both inherent and acquired diversity. Now, in order to reap all the benefits of having a diverse workplace, your workplace also has to be equitable and inclusive. And this is funny, when you think about, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we started hearing about diversity in the workplace. Then it turned into diversity and inclusion, and you'd hear the D&I initiatives. And then now more recently, what we have now is DEI. So we need the diversity and equity and inclusion. So the equity is the meaning that the extent to which individuals within an organization feel safe and respected and valued and are able to express themselves authentically. It refers to how individuals in these diverse work environments feel they're actually treated by their coworkers, managers, supervisors. How fair is that work environment? And then the I, inclusion, is, while diversity looks at the composition of the workforce, like, is it diverse? Inclusion measures how inclusive the interactions, policies, and practices are within that diverse workforce. So this includes things such as whether diverse employees have opportunities to grow within the organization, move up the ladder, get promotions, get leadership opportunities. An inclusive work environment is collaborative, supportive, a respectful environment that increases participation and contribution of all employees, including diverse employees. Sometimes inclusion is thought about as diversity is being asked to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance at the party. So turning back to taking these three concepts and turning it into the DEI initiative. As I mentioned before, these are voluntary. You don't have to do it. No law is telling you that you have to implement these policies, but it's something that companies do to increase diversity in the workplace and help underrepresented groups and individuals feel included and feel like they're being treated fairly. Because there's no laws really governing DEI, it's really just missions, strategies, practices that organizations are putting into place. Some of you may be familiar, you may have heard the concept voluntary affirmative action. That's sometimes how people refer to DEI initiatives, again, because they are voluntary, but because they actually seek to exceed what is required under the government's requirements of EEO and affirmative action. They go a step further, they do a little bit more. So now that we know and understand what DEI is and how that differs from EEO and affirmative action, I want to go over some of the benefits of having DEI in your workplace. So we all know DEI is a good thing, it's the right thing to do, but it has a lot of proven benefits, not only, again, for the employees themselves, but for the employers who are implementing these programs and initiatives. So these benefits include attracting and retaining talent. DEI has become a real top priority for recruitment and talent acquisition, and a diverse and inclusive workplace has become a critical component of a company's ability to attract, develop, and retain talent. So I've included some what I think are really important statistics on the slide. And you'll see, so a Glassdoor survey found that 67% of job seekers said a diverse workforce was important to them when they're considering job offers. And 57% of those surveyed said they think that their companies could be more diverse. A Deloitte study found that 72% of employees surveyed said that they would actually leave their current employer for a more diverse organization. And actually, in that same survey, 53% of millennials surveyed said they had already done that. And these are millennials, so they haven't been working all that long, but they have already left their job, a prior job, for a more diverse work environment. Another benefit is, if you're a company that is embracing and promoting diversity, you're going to attract more talent and you're going to cast a much wider net of job candidates and applicants, which is going to improve your chances for getting the best talent out there. Another benefit is that an inclusive and diverse workplace improves employee satisfaction and morale and can actually reduce conflicts between groups, improving your employee collaboration and loyalty. And this is because these programs are proven to improve understanding of the differences between you and those who you work for or with or around. So this can also result in reduced internal complaints and grievances. So for example, if an employee feels like their employer values their diversity and their background, that employee is going to be less likely to feel unprotected from discrimination or harassment in the workplace, and less likely to lodge an internal complaint or lawsuit for some sort of comments or behavior that could have been misperceived in a different workplace as discriminatory. But if they're thinking like, no, maybe I took that the wrong way because I know that this company values me and my differences. DEI also helps employees feel, again, accepted and valued, which makes them happier, which makes them better performers. And also the studies show that, when you have happy employees like this, they're less likely to leave. And so greater DEI is going to result in better retention and less turnover. Another benefit is creativity. So diverse and inclusive teams tend to be more creative and innovative than homogeneous groups. Diversity provides multiple perspectives on problem solving. So where you have people with different backgrounds, both, again, that inherent and that primary and secondary diversity, they're bringing different experiences, different points of views, different approaches to problem solving in the workplace. So, anytime you put together people who see the same thing in different ways, you're more likely to get fresh, innovative ideas, thus improving the creativity of your workplace. More benefits include better performance outcomes and increased employee productivity. There's significant data on this showing that more diverse workplaces are more productive and overall more successful. There is a direct correlation between more diverse leadership and financial performance. According to a recent PwC survey, 85% of CEOs surveyed said that having a diversified and inclusive workplace has improved their bottom line. So again, there's a lot of benefits to the employers for doing this. Now, another big issue we're seeing where DEI is really important is with client relations. So a growing number, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, of customers, vendors, clients are demanding that there are DEI initiatives from the companies with whom they work. I know Jason and I have had several clients at our firm who have asked us that we want to know your statistics. We want to know what you're doing with your DEI efforts. We want to know how diverse is your workforce. And sometimes that's really challenging to respond to because we don't always know how diverse our workforce is because people's diversity is not always apparent. Some things you can tell by looking at someone, but a lot of times you can't tell. And so we're going to talk, in the best practices section about perhaps doing a DEI audit so you can have a better understanding of the diversity of your workforce. And just another benefit of DEI is reflecting the increasingly diverse world in which we live in. So Generation Z, those people born between the years 1996 and 2010, so that's the demographic cohort following millennials, they're the most diverse generation in US history. You could see the statistics on the slide. And looking at that, only 52% identify as white. Millennials, 61 of them identify as white. Well, Gen Z is going to be the majority in the workforce within the next few years. Right now, it's millennials. It's about to be Gen Z. And this is important because Gen Z's expectations of their employers and their workplace is very different than the expectations of their parents, their grandparents, even their older, millennial siblings. So this youngest generation in the workforce has been very vocal about the fact that they want to work for companies that engage with social issues and prioritize DEI. So we need to make sure that in order to get that top talent from the largest generation, that we are implementing these policies. So now that we know that what DEI is, how great it is, how it's going to benefit our workforce, how do we not get into trouble? So let's talk about the laws. So workplace DEI efforts have the great goal of expanding opportunities for persons who are or traditionally have been underrepresented, whether in the workplace generally or within specific occupations. So in that sense, they have the same objectives as the anti-discrimination laws and the affirmative action laws. However, poor implementation and rushing to implement these DEI programs could actually result in legal exposure for these employers who are just trying to do the right thing. So, for example, programs or policies or efforts aimed at increasing the number of employees deemed as diverse could actually be challenged in court if it has the effect of denying such opportunities to other people whose characteristics that employer may not define as diverse. So in other words, if you have an initiative that includes giving some sort of preferential treatment to a person of a protected class to such an extent it disfavors someone of a different protected category, that would run afoul of the law. So remember, DEI is not affirmative action. So employers must tread carefully to ensure their programs do not violate anti-discrimination laws that prohibit employers from making employment decisions based on a person's protected characteristic. So some of the types of legal claims and laws that you could face having lodged against you as an employer, are on the slide, which I'm going to go through now. So discrimination. I'm sure you all know what discrimination is. So that's the unjust or prejudicial treatment of people based upon their membership in a protected category. Now, again, we talked about those protected categories: race, gender, religion, national origin. These are the EEO laws we discussed before. Here in New Jersey, the applicable laws, we've got the federal law, which is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then the New Jersey state law, which is called the Law Against Discrimination. And while Title VII only applies to employers with 15 employees or more, the Law Against Discrimination, or the LAD as we call it, applies to every employer that has even one employee. So you're all covered by these laws. And these laws make it unlawful to make employment decisions based on an individual's membership in a protected category. So for example, if you get 2 applicants for a job and there's a man and there's a woman, and you say, well, we need more women in the organization, let's hire the woman. You've just violated the law. You've just violated the law against discrimination because you made a decision based on a protected category. So again, it's a slippery slope. You're trying to increase diversity, but you can't do it and make hiring decisions based on a candidate being diverse. Often these sorts of actions result in what's called reverse discrimination. And this is something where, I talk to people and everyone knows what discrimination is, but when I say I'm, maybe handling a case where there's alleged claims of reverse discrimination, people say that's a thing. And it certainly is. So that is the type of discrimination where members of a majority or historically advantaged group, so typically Caucasians and males, it's where they're discriminated against based on their race, gender, or other protected characteristic. So these are the types of claims that often result from an employer's good faith efforts to provide opportunities to members of a traditionally underrepresented minority group. because under the law, your intent doesn't matter. So it's no defense to say, oh, well, we were just trying to increase diversity in the workplace, so we didn't hire the white male, even though he was more qualified. The reason was based on his protected characteristics. Again, if that's a violation of law. So another potential claim would be disparate impact. So the anti-discrimination laws prohibit disparate impact, which is where you've got some sort of practice or policy that is not intended to discriminate. It looks totally neutral on its face, but in fact, the way it plays out, it has a disproportionate adverse impact on certain protected categories. So examples, if you have some sort of physical ability test or written ability test, or you're doing criminal background checks or credit checks, having education requirements, certain appearance requirements or language policies, things that you're not referencing certain protected categories or certain groups. You're just saying we do this for everyone, but they tend to have a disparate impact on certain groups, and they impact certain groups more than others. So you've got the risk of having a disparate impact. So if you're again trying to diversify your workplace and get more members of a certain minority group, so tests or requirements are written in such a way to get those applicants but exclude members of other groups, you've got a potential disparate impact claim. We also see claims for hostile work environment in these situations. So for those unfamiliar with the term, a hostile work environment is a workplace that makes employees feel uncomfortable or intimidated due to unwelcome conduct or comments based upon an employee's membership in a protected category, right? So again, this is different from harassment. It's not just being mean, it's doing something that makes someone uncomfortable and in relation to one of their protected categories. There was a case where arising out of DEI initiatives that resulted in a hostile work environment claim. It was a case against Bank of America. And there the court found that the plaintiff, who was not allowed to take breaks to attend LGBTQ ERG, so those are employee resource groups, we're going to talk about those in a bit, but she couldn't attend those meetings, but other employees of different protected categories were able to take breaks to attend different ERG meetings. The court found that treating her differently and making her feel, not welcome in that work environment could contribute to a hostile work environment. Now, if anyone brings complaints about your DEI initiatives for any of the things we just talked about, discrimination, reverse discrimination, disparate impact, and they complain about it, and then they're later subject to some adverse employment action, you may have a claim for retaliation. They're going to say, I engaged in a protected activity, I complained about your poor implementation of your DEI policies, and then I got fired, or I didn't get the promotion. That was retaliation. So just something else to be mindful of. And then finally, there's pay equity laws, which are federal and state laws that require equal pay for equal work. So employers who pay a member of one protected category higher wages to perform the same work as a member of another protected category could be hit with a lawsuit for equal pay violations, even if the pay disparity was the result of some good faith effort to try to create more diversity in the workplace. This is a big one because we're seeing this a lot in harassment and discrimination litigation. There's just sort of adding on the pay equity laws. The New Jersey pay equity law only was implemented about 5 years ago, so it's still kind of new, and it's employers haven't caught up with it yet. So we're seeing that. So that's something to really be aware of. So I'm going to get into some of the best practices, but before I do, I want to discuss the concept of implicit bias, because you have to have a better understanding of implicit bias in order to make sure you're properly implementing DEI in your workplace. So I'm sure many of you heard of this concept before. This is a form of bias that occurs automatically, unintentionally. You don't even know what's happening, but it nevertheless affects judgments, decisions, and behaviors. So it's sort of our attitude towards people or associating stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. It's biases we don't even know we have. In fact, we don't even usually think we have them because implicit bias often runs counter to people's conscious expressed beliefs. And implicit bias in the workplace occurs when people act on subconscious attitudes and stereotypes they don't even know they have. So that'll come into play when implementing the best practices. So here are some things you can do within your organization to make sure that you can properly and safely implement DEI initiatives and practices. So let's starting with in recruitment. So there's simple ways to diversify and increase your applicant pools and then consequently your workforce by how and where you recruit talent. So you should take a look at your recruitment plans and making sure you're creating ones that target diverse groups. So review what your recruiting and hiring practices are to make sure that you're reaching the largest possible pool of applicants. So look for talent in new places, you know, through trade magazines, job fairs. There's a lot of groups where there's job fairs targeted to specific underrepresented groups. So, you know, veteran job fairs is a big one. There's no reason why you can't go to veteran job fairs or certain job fairs for, you know, a women's organization so that you're accessing that talent. If you have a referral incentive program, consider if that's a good or a bad thing for you. So, because often people's social and professional networks are made up of people who are demographically similar. Therefore, if you have a pretty homogeneous workforce right now, you know, very little diversity, and you focus on a referral incentive program when you're telling your people, you know, if you refer us someone and we hire them, you're going to get some sort of bonus. You're probably not going to be diversifying your workforce. You're going to get a lot more people who look like the people you currently have. On the other hand, if you do have a very diverse workforce, you should leverage that network by encouraging your employees, in particular your diverse employees, to make referrals since they're more likely to refer members of their community, thereby increasing the diversity of your applicant pool. I have accessibility on the slide. You want to make sure that all of your job postings, recruitment events, application processes, hiring process are made accessible to all of those applicants, including individuals with disabilities. So that includes visual disabilities, that includes physical disabilities. Let's make sure that you can get the information to them. You know, this is a good time to review your website and make sure you don't have any visual disability access problems with your website so that those with visual disabilities are able to even know that you've got job postings. And speaking of job postings, be mindful of the language in your job postings. Studies have found that language employers use in job descriptions may attract candidates, but they may actually deter diverse candidates for applying for a position. So, for example, you should be eliminating any reference to gender. I still see on websites, in job postings, you know, reference to his or her, he or she. That's not sufficient because if you're saying him or her, he or she, you've just turned off and perhaps turned away any potential applicants that identify as non-binary or non-conforming. So you should just say the candidate, the employee. The candidate will be doing this, the employee. And, you know, I've gotten pushback from that saying, well, I feel like I'm saying the candidate over and over, but fine, no one's going to be offended by you saying the candidate. No one's going to feel not welcome because you said the candidate. So remove references to gender. Should also write job descriptions that are result-based, not so much about the qualification or attributes of the candidate. This is because studies have shown men will apply for a job if they meet 60% of the listed qualifications, but women are only going to apply if they meet 100% of them. So instead of having a checklist of skills that may end up weeding out a great female or minority candidate, your job description should focus on what the candidate will actually be expected to achieve, you know, in a month, in 6 months, in a year. If that's not practical and you do need to include some sort of necessary skills and abilities, define them as narrowly as possible with a focus on the skill rather than the actual identity. For example, say, you will be required to dunk a basketball, not that you need to be 6'5" tall. Consider educational requirements. Is a bachelor's degree really required for the position? If you say it is, you may be excluding a whole pool of really talented candidates. I recommend adding to every job description just a little sentence at the end that explicitly encourages people not precisely matching all of the job specifications to apply anyway. Make sure your communications are clear. State your company's commitment to building a diverse and inclusive culture in your job descriptions, on your website, especially on your career page. One sentence can send a really strong message to applicants and go a long way. And the last thing on the slide, which I think is really important, is visuals. So diversity attracts diversity. Take a look back at your website, especially your career page. Look at your materials that you send to people. Look at the artwork in your office. What are you showing? What demographics are represented in your photos? I was going to show you an example of our website, but then I went back and looked, and we actually have no people on our website. So I don't have photos to show you from our website. We do have photos of our attorneys and staff, so you can see our diversity there, but we don't have any of the stock photos of people. So I went a step further and I looked at who were NJBIA's business partners for this presentation. And so the first one I picked was Horizon. And Horizon, don't worry, you did a perfect job. You get a gold star. And here's a photo from their website. This is specifically from their careers page. And they did exactly what they should be doing. And this is just one of many pictures on their website showing diversity. So if I'm an applicant looking for a job, I go on Horizon's career page. Not only do they have this sentence under our culture, they're a diverse company. They value the strengths and differences of their workforce. Diversity and inclusion is who we are. I mean, it's great. But before I even read that, I saw the picture and I saw, okay, good, great. There's a diverse work environment. I can find people that look like me or that I want to be around. So good job, Horizon. I'm sure all the other business partners do a great job as well. I didn't look at their websites. But that's just an example of things you can be doing. In that same vein, use a diverse set of interviewers. Again, diversity attracts diversity. So if someone's looking at a panel of interviewers that all look the same and don't look like me, you may be turning people off to your workplace. Studies also suggest that women are more likely to join a company when they can interact with women who are already there and can testify to the company's commitment to DEI. Some experts say one of the biggest deciding factors on whether or not a female candidate is going to accept a job at a company is whether there was a woman on the interviewing panel. Use consistent and objective criteria in your interviewing. So use consistent questions. If you have a structured interview, that's going to lead to higher quality hires, because this is where that concept of implicit bias comes in again. It's going to reduce the implicit bias and those gut feeling hires, right? So have you ever had someone say I don't think they're a fit for our organization, but they can't articulate the reason? If you're asking candidates the same or similar questions, all the candidates, you're going to have a consistent data set, which is going to help that objective decision maker. And you should fight back. Tell your hiring managers, okay, well, culture fit or a fit is not a good enough reason to, not hire someone. Because sometimes by saying, I don't know, just my gut says they're not a fit, that's an indication that unconscious bias may be at play. Again, they don't even know that they're doing that because it's unconscious. So challenge your interviewers to articulate the specific explanation for their hiring decisions. And speaking of implicit bias, you should train your hiring managers, on implicit bias and how to keep that out of their decisioning process. One way to keep implicit bias out of the decision making is to actually insulate your decision makers from certain things. So there could be blind screening, blind resumes, where names and addresses and other information on a resume isn't really needed to determine, okay, should we bring this person in for an interview? That's sort of removing personal information about a candidate from a hiring manager that could result in unconscious bias about the candidate. In that same vein, if you were an organization that does social media searches, Melissa Salimbene was applied for the job. You look Melissa Salimbene up on Google, see what comes up. That sort of thing is going to show a lot of information about the candidate, a lot of protected information, race, gender, perhaps, religion, familial status. So if you are going to do that social media search, have someone else do it who can say, okay, no bad results, nothing we have to worry about. Or, oh yes, she was, she's suing her former employer for whatever, if there is something, they can say what that is. But this way, by having a separate person do that social media search, they're not going to disclose the protected categories to that decision maker. And another thing you can do is eliminate salary negotiation. And this is where the pay equity laws come into play as well. Because studies show that men tend to negotiate more than women. And when women negotiate, sometimes they actually get penalized for it. So try to not have any negotiation. This is what we're paying for the position. If that's not realistic and there needs to be some sort of negotiation, consider a very narrow band for the role. Here's the range for the position. And that will minimize your risk of running afoul of pay equity laws. So that was in recruiting, interviewing, and hiring, but now turning to what you can do for your current employees. Before I move on, was there any questions? I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys.
We're going to take questions at the end of your presentation, Melissa.
All right, super. Thanks, Jason. All right, so for current employees, things you can do is having written policies and procedures, in particular on the things we talked about today, EEO policy, anti-discrimination, anti-harassment policies, and your written DEI policies and initiatives. Just like with your job postings, make sure your company policies do not refer to gender. Again, no he or she. I see these sort of policies every day, and I'm still amazed by how many do that. So say the employee. This applies to all written materials, not just your policies, but any employee agreements. Just, don't use the he or she pronouns. Not just does your language need to be gender neutral, but your policies need to be gender neutral. For example, don't say we're all about diversity and equality and inclusiveness, but we have a maternity leave policy. You should have a parental leave policy. You shouldn't be referring to, and you shouldn't be referring to new mothers. I was actually doing a DEI training for a client and reviewed their website. And I said how perfect everything was until I got to the benefits page, and it was all about new moms. And so, okay, you may have someone who birthed a child who doesn't identify as a mother, but you also have other parents. And so those sorts of policies should be neutral. Other things you can do is providing training to your employees. So you should be doing annual harassment and discrimination training. You should be doing training on unconscious bias. Again, people think I have no bias at all. I don't know what you're talking about, unconscious bias, but I've included on the slide, there's the implicit bias test that Harvard has, which is a kind of weird test. You click on it, it shows a bunch of pictures, you hit a bunch of buttons real quick, and then it actually tells you your level and what kind of implicit biases you have. So if you haven't done it, it's kind of interesting. I recommend you do it. And I recommend that you advise your employees to try it as well. Provide an opportunity for feedback from your employees. So this can be a system where employees give anonymous feedback or not anonymous feedback on your DEI initiatives. This is going to help you refine your programs, your DEI programs and initiatives, find out, what's working or what could we do better. And then take steps to make sure that your company culture is an inclusive one. Like I said before, you could create a formal DEI initiative. If you do, I recommend you involve every employee in formulating that and executing these initiatives in the workplace, not just the diverse employees. It should be something that all employees are a part of. And that's really important because we see a lot of like, oh, we put all the diverse employees into one club and that's our DEI initiative. No, it needs to be everyone, and everyone needs to have that opportunity to participate. Make sure that the leaders of the company are regularly communicating about these issues and the company's efforts. Consider having workshops and inviting guest speakers from the DEI community to present to your organization. Support ongoing programs, public programs, and community initiatives surrounding DEI, and participate in community events that celebrate diversity populations. Have your company's name attached to those sorts of events. Hold internal events that celebrate your employees' diverse and religious cultures. My firm is super lucky to have Jason Holt as the chair of our DEI initiative. And Jason and I were chatting the other day because October is Hispanic Heritage Month, and Jason and his team has organized, we're going to have, different foods brought into the firm. And I hear there's going to be salsa dance lessons, which I need to sign up for, Jason. So, doing these sorts of events are really important, and it makes your workforce feel included and appreciated, and gives them an opportunity to learn about other cultures. Something else you can do is eliminate focusing on only certain religions, or Christian holidays. For example, if you have an annual Christmas party or a holiday party that recognizes only, one religion or a few religions, that is not inclusive. So consider holding a winter party or an end of year celebration instead, and just changing the name of the same thing makes it feel much more inclusive. In that same vein, instead of having set holidays off, provide floating holidays that an employee can pick their holidays, and so they can take off the days that are important to them and their individual beliefs. You could even consider having flexible hours or scheduling any team bonding activities during the day to accommodate those employees that have children or other work obligations, including any caretaking obligations. Another really simple thing you can do is just rotate who runs meetings. Show diverse people running the meeting, standing at the front, standing at the podium, or giving diverse people other leadership opportunities. And then finally, having a standardized performance review system. And so again, this is another way to try to keep out the implicit bias in making employment decisions, and also soliciting 360 reviews. So managers are getting multiple perspectives. And again, once again, trying to eliminate that unconscious bias.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm jumping in because we're running out of time.
Oh, no, okay.
And if you have some conclusionary remarks that you'd like to make.
I will. Yeah,
okay.
I will. I'll just finish up real quick, because you're all going to get the slides. So the rest of it is really just, best practices. I talk about use of pronouns, perhaps doing a DEI audit. And then what I didn't have time to get into is employee resource groups. But this is something that, you'll see on the slides. There's benefits to them. There's some legal risk to them. But honestly, all of the information you need for the ERGs and ways to mitigate risks if you are going to have ERGs is all on the slides. So it's all there. Happy to answer any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you for a very thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure everyone who has tuned into it, I see we didn't lose anyone during the course of your presentation, so everyone hung in there with us. So thank you. And now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. But as a reminder, if you haven't updated your Zoom recently, please make sure you do so. The latest version does allow your computer to download all the text from the chat onto the file with the name of our meeting. We have a question from Jerry, and her question is about reverse discrimination versus disparate impact. And she queries, what are some ways to avoid this catch-22? If an employer is trying to avoid committing reverse discrimination, doesn't the employer end up having a disproportionate effect on applicants from underrepresented groups?
So the way to avoid it is, not to decide. That's what we talked about, like with recruiting. So let's open up that net and get the most applicants possible. And then let's hire the best candidate for the job. So the way to get that more diverse workplace is to get the more diverse applicants. But then you can't say, well, white guy is the best guy person candidate, they're the best for the job, but we're not going to hire him because he's a white guy. So, and you'd be surprised in that, there's companies and hiring partners that put that sort of communication, they say it to a room full of people, they put it in an email, and they have just violated the discrimination laws because they're not looking at his qualifications for the job anymore. They were just looking at, race and gender and not hiring him for that reason. But if you've got white guy, Hispanic woman, African American man, non-binary, whatever. If you've got all these candidates and they're all equally, the best candidates for the job, and then you choose, not because they're diverse, but you choose one of the diverse candidates, then you're fine. That's okay. But you can't say, well, we're only going to hire this person. The reason we're hiring this person, or a major reason we're hiring this person, is because of their being in a protected category.
Thank you. There's another question, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, from Unide Alexandre. And she thanks you for your presentation and asks, can you elaborate a little more on the recent cases of Bank of America or instances where DEI goals face legal scrutiny?
So if it was the Bank of America case that I mentioned during it, that was a different case. That was a case where there was a bunch of issues where the plaintiff was alleging a hostile work environment. And one of the examples she used, because she was a member of the LGBTQ community, and she was treated differently because while other employees were able to attend these employee resource groups for race, gender, whatever it is, she wasn't given that same courtesy to attend an LGBTQ ERG. And so that was an issue where, I didn't get to talk about the ERGs, but if you are going to have them, you have to make sure that those opportunities are given to all employees, no matter what the ERG is, and that people are, all given the same opportunity to participate.
And we have a question from Justin Tubby. How often do you think companies should train in DEI efforts?
I think they should do it annually. I think annually you should be training, especially your managers and supervisors. You should be providing training on a variety of things. Your whole workforce should be getting harassment and discrimination training annually. And so you can typically tag on the DEI to that, but it's very important because the hiring managers, those who are making these sorts of decisions, you want to make sure that they're not just knowledgeable on how to implement DEI, but making sure they're not violating the law. Because again, I've seen emails where it's just like, well, we need more diversity, so let's not hire this person based on, a protected characteristic. So just making sure that they are aware of how to do this in a lawful way.
So is there a cardinal rule that employers should follow when it comes to creating a diverse and inclusive workforce?
I think that, I don't know if there's just one cardinal rule, because obviously I was talking for an hour on it. I could talk another hour on it, but I think what you need to do is, become knowledgeable about these concepts, do what you can to, again, widen that net, promote your company as one that values DEI, is implementing DEI. So those diverse folks want to come to your company. And then, like I said, with doing, soliciting feedback, figure out what you're doing right, what you're doing well, and what you could do better.
Well, what would you say to companies that are a bit squeamish about implementing DEI efforts, particularly given what's been broadcast throughout the news media very recently?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern right now with what's going on in the news because of the Supreme Court's decision with affirmative action as it relates to colleges. So that's a different law that's the Supreme Court saying that colleges and universities can no longer consider race in deciding applicant admissions. But what that is doing is saying, okay, well, what is the landscape right now? And I think now is a good time for employers and companies to look at their policies and procedures and make sure that they're doing things correctly, and make sure they're not violating law. They can't look at race. The colleges could in the past, employers never could use that as a factor in making employment decisions, but figuring out, how can we do things within our organization lawfully. And, one way to do that is engage your legal counsel and say, here's what we're planning to do. Is that okay? And, even just the best practices I gave today, sharing that with your organization, like we should certainly be implementing these, but making sure we're doing it in a proper and lawful way.
We're going to run slightly over because we have 2 more questions that just popped up on the screen. And this question is from Shell Bobev. Some DEI practitioners are advising employers to have explicit DEI goals in writing. Isn't that something that would create risk of claims?
No, I think not a well-drafted DEI policy. So, as was noted on the slides, that's something I do recommend you do but I recommend you have legal counsel either consulting on that or writing that for you. But it's written in a way, just sort of like those EEO statements are written. Your policy would be written in a way that, we're committed to DEI. It's not, you could talk about ways you're going to try to, recruit talent from different places, but you're not going to say like, well, we're going to hire diverse candidates over not diverse candidates, or we're going to promote diverse candidates over not diverse candidates. You're going to just talk about the positive things and some of the best practices I went over today, and that would be part of your policy. And in fact, it could actually, if it's well drafted and properly drafted, that could actually give you a good defense if you are faced with some of these claims.
There's a second part to that question where Shell indicates she's really looking at the nuances of the matters. But I'm going to move to the last question of our presentation from Faith Holt, no relation, a question on ERGs. So if a company does something for a specific minority group or a select group of minorities in general, are you saying all employees need to be able to attend? Is it possible to record a session and make the recording available to all as an option?
Yes, it's not just legally what you need to do, but it's practically what you should do. And I use as an example, like our firm, we have a women's initiative. And when the women's initiative is doing things, we want the men to come. If we're having even just like a women's initiative, like lunch to talk about issues that we're dealing with as professional women, I want the men to hear that. I want them to hear the challenges that we face. And it's really productive, especially when your leadership is male. It's productive for them to be that. So same with any ERG. And ERG, and one of the slides there's tons of ERGs. There's, ones with working parents. There's ones based on race. There's ones based on sexual orientation. But part of that is, educating people that don't fall within those categories to learn more about that. So it is really important practically to include everyone. But again, under the law as well, you have to give everyone the opportunity to participate.
Melissa, thank you so much. We're all going to give you a virtual round of applause.
Thank you for having me.
And now we're going to do a little bit of networking. So you will see a pop-up to join a breakout room. Melissa, I hope you can stick around.
Sure.
We will not be returning after the networking. On behalf of NJBIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council leaders, I want to wish everyone a great, healthy, and happy fall in the event that we don't see you until next year. Danielle is going to put us into the breakout rooms, and we will have one question to help get our networking and conversation going from what you gathered from the talk today. So see you in a minute.